A billionaire holds up an ancient manuscript and teases, "I'll give you my entire fortune if you translate this." 5 experts try and fail, becoming the target of laughter and public humiliation. Then, a cleaning lady enters with her 7-year-old daughter, and the girl begins to read the text with disconcerting fluency. What she reveals transforms not only the room, but the whole sense of power and knowledge there. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. The grand ballroom of the Chrysler Building's top floor buzzed with anticipation. New York's elite, tech moguls, Wall Street tycoons, media personalities, and academics mingled with champagne flutes in hand. Overhead, crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow across marble floors as servers in crisp uniforms weaved through the crowd with trays of hors d'oeuvres. At precisely 8 o'clock, the room fell silent. Maxwell Reed, America's 5th richest man and CEO of Horizon Technologies, stepped onto the raised platform. At 53, Maxwell cut an imposing figure, tall and lean with silver-streaked dark hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to calculate the worth of everything they observed. His custom Tom Ford suit probably cost more than what most Americans earned in 3 months. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying effortlessly across the room, "thank you for joining me on this unique evening." Maxwell gestured toward a glass display case being wheeled onto the stage by white-gloved attendants. Inside lay an ancient-looking manuscript, its pages yellowed and edges frayed. 3 months ago, I received this remarkable item as part of my great-uncle's estate. According to family law, it was acquired during his archaeological expeditions in the 1950s. Maxwell's lips curled into what might have been a smile. As someone who values knowledge and innovation, I naturally sought to understand its contents. The audience leaned forward collectively. I consulted 8 separate institutions. None could decipher it completely. He paused dramatically. The writing appears to be a complex blend of ancient languages, classical Chinese, Sanskrit, biblical Hebrew, Arabic, Persian, and archaic Latin, shifting from one to another without apparent pattern or reason. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Maxwell raised his hand, silencing them instantly. "Tonight I present a challenge. $1 million to anyone who can translate this document in its entirety." His eyes glinted. "And should you fail, you pay me $1 million. The room erupted in shocked whispers. "I've invited 5 of America's most celebrated linguists and translators to attempt this feat. Each has signed a binding contract accepting these terms. They believe their credentials, their prestigious degrees, their published works, their academic positions guarantee their success." Maxwell's smile widened, revealing perfect teeth. "I'm less convinced." From the front row, Dr. Eleanor Davies, chair of ancient languages at Columbia University, rose to her feet. In her 60s, with silver hair in a tight bun and wire-rimmed glasses, she projected the confidence of someone who'd spent decades mastering her field. "Mr. Reed, I accept your challenge first." Maxwell gestured grandly toward the display case. "The stage is yours, Professor." As Dr. Davies approached the manuscript, technicians adjusted cameras to project close-up images onto massive screens. The audience watched as she donned white gloves and carefully examined the first page. "Interesting," she murmured into the microphone. "The first section appears to be classical Chinese, perhaps from the Tang Dynasty period." She traced her finger above the characters, careful not to touch the fragile paper. For 20 minutes, the audience watched in uncomfortable silence as Dr. Davies's confident expression gradually dissolved into confusion, then dismay. She flipped between pages, consulted reference materials on her tablet, and made numerous notes. "The Chinese characters are authentic," she finally announced, "but they don't form coherent sentences. The structure is that peculiar." She moved to the next section. "This appears to be classical Arabic, but again, while the characters are correct, the sequences are—" Her voice faltered. Maxwell stepped forward. "Are you saying you cannot translate it, Professor Davies?" "I need more time," she insisted, color rising in her cheeks. "The terms were clear," Maxwell replied smoothly. "Immediate and complete translation." He checked his watch theatrically. "You've had 27 minutes. The audience shifted uncomfortably as they watched the renowned scholar struggle. After another 15 minutes of increasingly desperate attempts, Dr. Davies removed her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. The manuscript appears to be some sort of elaborate linguistic puzzle, she admitted. The individual characters are authentic, but they're arranged in patterns I've never encountered. Maxwell's smile was predatory. So you cannot translate it? The silence in the room was absolute. No, Dr. Davies finally admitted, not without extensive research and possibly collaboration with specialists in each language family. How disappointing, Maxwell said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. A full professor with 3 doctoral degrees, author of 7 books on ancient languages, and recipient of the Presidential Medal for Academic Achievement, unable to read a simple document. Dr. Davies stiffened. This is hardly a fair... Your contract, Professor, Maxwell interrupted, gesturing to his assistant who promptly presented a tablet. $1 million, due immediately. You may arrange a wire transfer now. The audience watched in horrified fascination as the color drained from Dr. Davies' face. She had clearly never expected to lose. This is absurd, she protested. No individual could possibly... You signed the contract, Maxwell said coldly. Shall we proceed with the legal consequences of breach, or will you honor your commitment? With trembling fingers, Dr. Davies authorized the transfer. As she stepped down from the stage, Maxwell turned to the audience with a triumphant smile. Who's next, Doctor? Jonathan Parker, the renowned Yale linguist, approached the stage with visible apprehension. Stocky, bearded, and dressed in a tweed jacket despite the warm May evening, he projected scholarly confidence that barely masked his growing unease. Mr. Reed, he began, adjusting his bow tie, I believe Dr. Davies' approach was too conventional. Ancient texts often require contextual understanding beyond mere translation. Maxwell gestured to the manuscript with exaggerated courtesy. By all means, Dr. Parker, show us your unconventional approach. Parker's attempt lasted longer, but ended just as disastrously. His innovative linguistic theories crumbled against the manuscript's mysteries. When Maxwell demanded his $1 million, Parker's face contorted with rage and humiliation, but he complied. As the evening progressed, 3 more experts faced the same fate. Each approached with confidence, each left financially and professionally devastated. The audience, initially uncomfortable with the spectacle, now watched with the horrified fascination of rubberneckers at a highway accident. Maxwell seemed to grow more energized with each failure. His commentary became increasingly cutting, his enjoyment of their humiliation more evident. By the time the 5th expert left the stage, the billionaire was practically glowing with satisfaction. And thus concludes our entertainment for the evening, Maxwell announced, surveying the room with undisguised triumph. 5 of America's most celebrated linguistic minds, unable to justify their lifetime of accolades. He raised his champagne glass. Perhaps we should reconsider what constitutes true expertise in our modern world. The guests applauded uncertainly, caught between social obligation and moral discomfort. As servers circulated with fresh drinks, the evening's spectacle became the sole topic of hushed conversations. No one noticed the maintenance staff quietly entering through service doors, beginning their after-hours work. And certainly, no one paid any attention to the young Latina woman pushing a cleaning cart, her 7-year-old daughter trailing quietly behind her. They were, after all, invisible people in the world of Maxwell Reed. Elena Rodriguez moved efficiently through the ballroom, emptying crystal ashtrays and collecting abandoned champagne flutes. Most of the guests had departed, leaving behind the wreckage of their revelry. Napkins crumpled into origami shapes, half-eaten canapes, and the lingering scent of expensive perfumes. "Mama, I'm bored," whispered Lucia, her 7-year-old daughter tugging at the hem of Elena's grey uniform. "I know, Misha," Elena replied softly. "The school closing today was unexpected. Just 1 more hour, then we can go home." She glanced at her watch, nearly midnight. The child should be in bed, not trailing behind her mother's cleaning cart in a skyscraper at this hour. Lucia nodded solemnly. She was accustomed to these situations, emergency arrangements when childcare fell through. At 7, she was already remarkably self-sufficient, entertaining herself with books while her mother worked. Tonight, she carried her backpack filled with library books and a small notebook where she practiced her writing. From across the room, Maxwell Reed's voice rose above the murmurs of his remaining guests. He stood near the display case, still basking in his victory over the humiliated academics. Most had fled immediately after their defeats, but Dr. Claire Montgomery, the youngest of the five and a rising star in computational linguistics, remained, engaged in intense conversation with the billionaire. "How you deliberately constructed an impossible puzzle," she accused, her voice tight with controlled anger. This was never about scholarship. It was about spectacle and humiliation. Maxwell laughed, the sound cutting through the cavernous room. "I constructed nothing, Dr. Montgomery. The manuscript is absolutely genuine. The fact that you and your colleagues couldn't decipher it speaks to the limitations of your much-celebrated expertise. No single person could possibly master all those ancient languages with enough fluency to translate such a document," Dr. Montgomery insisted. "It would take a team of specialists years of collaborative work." "Perhaps," Maxwell conceded with a smirk, "or perhaps your entire field is built on exaggerated claims of knowledge." As Elena worked her way closer to the stage, Lucia trailed behind, her attention caught by the illuminated manuscript still displayed on the pedestal. While the adults argued, the child slipped away from her mother and approached the display case, standing on tiptoes to peer inside. "Your academic elitism is precisely what I aim to expose," Maxwell continued, warming to his theme. "You people sit in your ivory towers, pronouncing judgments and claiming special knowledge that justifies your status and salary. Tonight proved how hollow those claims really are." Dr. Montgomery's retort died on her lips as she noticed the small girl studying the manuscript with unusual intensity. "Excuse me," she interrupted Maxwell, "but there's a child by the display case." Maxwell turned, irritation flashing across his face. "Where did she come from?" His eyes scanned the room, landing on Elena, who was hurrying toward her daughter. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Reed," Elena said, reaching for Lucia's hand. "My daughter's school closed unexpectedly today. I had no alternative childcare." Maxwell's expression hardened. Building policy strictly prohibits bringing family members to work, especially around valuable items. He signaled to his security team. "Please escort them out and ensure they're not assigned to my events again." Elena paled. "Please, sir, I need this job. It won't happen again." "Mama, look!" Lucia interrupted, pointing excitedly at the manuscript. "It's like the stories you read to me." "Not now, Lucia," Elena whispered urgently, trying to pull her daughter away. But something in the child's tone caught Dr. Montgomery's attention. "Wait," she said, approaching them. "What did you see, sweetie?" Lucia pointed to the first page. "These are like the symbols in my bedtime stories." Maxwell laughed derisively. "Wonderful. After 5 distinguished professors fail, we'll now hear from the cleaning lady's kid." Dr. Montgomery shot him a disapproving look before kneeling beside Lucia. "Can you tell me what you see?" Lucia nodded enthusiastically. "This part says, 'The path to wisdom begins with the recognition of one's own ignorance.'" Her finger moved confidently across the characters. "It's in old Chinese, like the stories Mama reads about dragons and emperors." The room fell silent. Dr. Montgomery stared at the child, then at the manuscript, then back at the child. That's correct," she whispered. "At least the characters you pointed to could indeed be interpreted that way in classical Chinese." She glanced up at Elena with newfound curiosity. "Does your daughter study Chinese?" Before Elena could answer, Maxwell stepped forward, his initial irritation transforming into calculated interest. "An amusing parlor trick," he said. "Perhaps she memorized that line from somewhere." "Try the next section," Dr. Montgomery suggested to Lucia, ignoring him. With a technician's assistance, they carefully turned to the next page. Lucia studied it briefly, then began to read aloud in what sounded like perfect classical Arabic. "Wealth without compassion blinds the soul. Power without conscience corrupts the heart," she translated effortlessly. "Those who cannot see the light in humble places walk in darkness even under the midday sun." Dr. Montgomery's eyes widened. She reached for her reference materials, checking the characters against her notes. That's accurate," she confirmed, her voice barely above a whisper. "How is this possible?" Maxwell's smirk had vanished, replaced by intense curiosity. He gestured for the technician to turn to another section, this one in what appeared to be Sanskrit. Without hesitation, Lucia read, "The true measure of wisdom lies not in what one claims to know, but in one's capacity to recognize worth in others. One by one, they turned through the pages, and page by page, Lucia read fluently, ancient Hebrew, Persian, Latin, each passage continuing the philosophical thread about wisdom, humility, and human value. The remaining guests gathered around in stunned silence. Dr. Montgomery frantically took notes, occasionally confirming specific translations with reference texts on her tablet. Each time, Lucia's interpretation proved accurate. "This is impossible," whispered one of Maxwell's associates. "How could a child possibly know these languages?" All eyes turned to Elena, who stood rigid, her face a mask of complex emotions. "Your daughter," Maxwell said slowly, fixing Elena with an intense stare. "How can she read this?" Elena hesitated, her hands clutching the handle of her cleaning cart so tightly her knuckles whitened. "She just has a gift for languages," she said carefully. "No one has a gift for 6 ancient languages," Maxwell countered, "especially not a 7-year-old. His eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" The question hung in the air. Elena looked down at her daughter, who gazed back with complete trust. Something in that exchange seemed to strengthen Elena's resolve. "My name is Dr. Elena Vega Rodriguez," she said quietly, straightening her shoulders. "Formerly professor of comparative linguistics at Stanford University, specializing in ancient language systems and cross-cultural philosophical texts." Dr. Montgomery gasped. Elena Vega. The Elena Vega who published the groundbreaking work on structural parallels between ancient Eastern and Western philosophical writings. She stared in disbelief. "Your research revolutionized the field a decade ago, then you just disappeared." "I had no choice," Elena replied, her voice barely audible. Maxwell studied her with newfound intensity. "You're telling me you're actually a linguistics expert, working as my cleaning staff?" His laugh held no humor. "And am I to believe you somehow taught your child 6 ancient languages before elementary school?" 7, actually, Elena corrected. "She also reads Aramaic." A hint of pride crept into her voice, despite her obvious discomfort. "Children's brains are remarkably adaptive. Lucia learned these languages naturally, the way most children learn their mother tongue, through stories, songs, and daily practice." "Mama tells the best stories," Lucia chimed in, apparently oblivious to the tension surrounding her. "Stories about wisdom and courage and kindness, sometimes in Chinese, sometimes in Arabic." She shrugged, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. Maxwell's gaze shifted between mother and daughter, his expression unreadable. Finally, he turned to his assistant. "Clear the room," he ordered. "Everyone except Dr. Vega Rodriguez, her daughter, and Dr. Montgomery." He paused, then added, "And bring my lawyer." As the remaining guests and staff filed out, Maxwell circled Elena like a predator assessing its prey. "You claim to be a former Stanford professor, now working as a janitor in my building, who has somehow taught a child to read languages that stumped 5 of the country's top experts." His voice dripped with skepticism. "You must understand my incredulity." Elena met his gaze steadily. "I understand completely, Mr. Reed, but as your evening has already demonstrated, credentials and current status don't always reflect true knowledge or ability." Something flickered in Maxwell's eyes, surprise perhaps at her composure. Before he could respond, his lawyer entered with a tablet in hand. "Now," Maxwell said, gesturing toward the manuscript, "let's continue this fascinating demonstration. Lucia, would you please read the final passage?" Lucia stepped forward confidently, her small fingers hovering just above the final page of the manuscript. The room had emptied except for her mother, Maxwell, Dr. Montgomery, and the lawyer who stood silently recording everything on his tablet. "This part is in Latin," Lucia said, her voice clear in the quiet room. "Verus divitiae non in auro vel potentia sed in sapientia, et compassione inveniuntur, qui humiles ignorat, veram lucem numquam videbit." She looked up at the adults. "It means, true wealth is found not in gold or power, but in wisdom and compassion. One who ignores the humble will never see the true light." Dr. Montgomery checked her reference materials and nodded, visibly astonished. "Her translation is flawless." Maxwell remained silent, studying Elena with intense scrutiny. His initial mockery had vanished, replaced by calculating interest. "Dr. Vega Rodriguez," he finally said, "I believe you owe us an explanation." Elena glanced at her daughter. Lucia, Mika, why don't you sit over there and read one of your books? The adults need to talk. Once Lucia was settled in a corner with her backpack, Eleanor turned to face Maxwell. Her posture transformed subtly. Her shoulders straightened, her chin lifted, and despite her grey maintenance uniform, she suddenly projected the quiet authority of the scholar she had once been. 10 years ago, I was an associate professor at Stanford, she began. My work focused on ancient philosophical texts across multiple language families. I was particularly interested in how wisdom traditions shared common threads despite geographic and cultural separation. Dr. Montgomery nodded. Your paper on linguistic parallels between Confucian and Stoic texts was groundbreaking. We still assign it to graduate students. Thank you, Elena acknowledged with a small smile. My career was flourishing. I had just received a major research grant and was being considered for early tenure. Her expression darkened. Then I met Robert Harris. The name sounds familiar, Dr. Montgomery said. He was a visiting professor from Princeton, specializing in comparative philosophy. Brilliant man, charismatic? Eleanor's voice remained steady, but her hands twisted the fabric of her uniform. We married after a whirlwind romance. At first, we were intellectual partners, collaborating on research. Then I discovered an ancient manuscript during a research trip to Turkey, similar to the one you have here, though smaller. She gestured toward the display case. It contained philosophical writings in multiple ancient languages, shifting between them as concepts required specific cultural frameworks. I spent months working on it, developing a new theory about cross-cultural philosophical transmission. Maxwell leaned forward. And what happened? When I shared my findings with Robert, he became strange, distant. Then my research notes began disappearing. Key reference materials vanished from my office. Eleanor's voice hardened. I was preparing to publish when accusations of academic dishonesty surfaced. Someone had circulated emails, allegedly from me, showing I had fabricated evidence and plagiarized portions of my research. I remember that scandal, Dr. Montgomery said quietly. The academic community was shocked. You had such a sterling reputation. Elena nodded grimly. The evidence was convincing. Emails, altered research notes, testimony from colleagues. I was suspended pending investigation. Then Robert presented his own paper on cross-cultural philosophical transmission, using methodology suspiciously similar to mine. He set you up, Dr. Montgomery whispered. Sabotaged your career to steal your research. I couldn't prove it, Eleanor continued. He was careful, and he had powerful friends in the department. When I confronted him privately, he didn't even deny it. He simply said that my career was over and that no one would believe me over him. Maxwell's expression remained unreadable, but his eyes never left Elena's face. I was 7 months pregnant when the university dismissed me, she said. Robert filed for divorce immediately after, claiming my academic disgrace had irreparably damaged our relationship. I lost everything: my reputation, my career, my home, my research. The academic world closed ranks against me. So you disappeared, Dr. Montgomery concluded. Eleanor nodded. I moved to New York, changed back to my maiden name, and took whatever work I could find. When Lucia was born, I promised myself 2 things: that I would give her the education I could no longer provide in a classroom, and that someday, somehow, I would clear my name. And you taught your daughter ancient languages as bedtime stories, Maxwell said, his tone somewhere between skepticism and admiration. Children's brains are wired for language acquisition, Elena explained. Lucia picked them up naturally, the way bilingual children learn multiple languages simultaneously. I didn't push her. I simply shared what I loved. Maxwell turned to his lawyer. Verify her story. Stanford records, the plagiarism case, everything. The lawyer nodded and stepped away, already typing on his tablet. Now, Maxwell continued, turning back to Elena, assuming your story checks out, there's still the matter of tonight's challenge. Your daughter has apparently succeeded where 5 experts failed. He studied her carefully. What do you want? Elena met his gaze directly. Justice, Mr. Reed. Not revenge, but restoration. Before Maxwell could respond, his lawyer returned, looking somewhat shocked. Sir, I've confirmed the basics. Dr. Elena Vega was indeed a rising star at Stanford until a plagiarism scandal in 2015. She was dismissed, and shortly after, Dr. Robert Harris published a landmark paper that launched his career. He's currently department chair at Princeton. Maxwell nodded slowly, then turned to Dr. Montgomery. Your professional opinion, doctor? Is this child's ability legitimate? Dr. Montgomery didn't hesitate. I've never seen anything like it, but yes, Lucia correctly translated passages in 6 ancient languages that stumped the best minds in our field. Either this is the most elaborate hoax in academic history, or she genuinely possesses extraordinary linguistic abilities. Maxwell walked to the window, gazing out at the Manhattan skyline glittering against the night sky. For several minutes he said nothing, his back to the room. When he finally turned, his expression had changed. The arrogance remained, but something else had entered his eyes, a calculating intensity. Dr. Vega Rodriguez, he said formally, according to the terms I established, your daughter has successfully translated the manuscript. The prize is $1 million. Elena blinked in surprise. Mr. Reed, I didn't come here seeking... Nevertheless, he interrupted, I am a man of my word, however unexpected the outcome. He gestured to his lawyer. Draw up the necessary paperwork. The funds will be transferred to a trust for Lucia, with her mother as trustee. Dr. Montgomery stared at him in astonishment. Just like that? After what you put those other scholars through? Maxwell's smile was thin. I'm a businessman, doctor. I recognize when I've been outmaneuvered. He turned back to Elena. However, I have a proposition that goes beyond our unexpected contest. Elena regarded him warily. What kind of proposition? The academic world destroyed your career based on false accusations, Maxwell said. I have the resources to help you reclaim your rightful place, and perhaps more. Why would you help me? Elena asked, suspicion evident in her voice. Maxwell gestured toward the manuscript. Self-interest, primarily. This document has clearly been misunderstood and undervalued. I'm curious about its contents, especially now that I know what it actually says. He paused, studying her. And I'll admit to being intrigued by your story. I appreciate resilience and intelligence, even when it appears in unexpected places. Eleanor glanced at her daughter, then back at Maxwell. What exactly are you proposing? Initially, I want you to fully translate and analyze this manuscript, with proper compensation, of course. Beyond that, he seemed to consider his next words carefully. Horizon Technologies has been criticized for its lack of educational initiatives and community engagement. Perhaps it's time to address that deficiency. He began pacing, his energy building visibly. A new division focused on educational access, linguistic preservation, and cultural heritage. Substantial funding, complete academic freedom, and a platform to re-establish your credentials without university politics. Eleanor's expression remained guarded. And you would put a discredited academic in charge of this division? I would put a brilliant linguist who was wrongfully accused in charge, Maxwell corrected, with the full weight of my influence behind her reinstatement. Why? Eleanor pressed. This sudden interest in education and justice seems inconsistent with your reputation, Mr. Reed. Maxwell's expression hardened. Perhaps I have my own reasons for recognizing when someone has been unfairly destroyed by those in power. Something flickered in his eyes, a hint of old pain quickly masked. Before Elena could respond, Lucia approached from her corner, tugging gently at her mother's uniform. Mama, the book is talking about him, she said, pointing at Maxwell. What do you mean, mija? Elena asked. The manuscript, Lucia explained. The last part says, even those blinded by gold may find sight if they listen to the voice of a child. She looked up at Maxwell with the direct, unfiltered gaze unique to children. I think it means you, Mr. Reed. A strange silence fell over the room. Maxwell stared at the child, his usual composure momentarily shaken. Out of the mouths of babes, Dr. Montgomery murmured. Maxwell recovered quickly, but something had shifted in his demeanor. Your daughter is quite remarkable, Dr. Vega Rodriguez. My offer stands, with one addition. Full academic rehabilitation requires confronting those who wronged you. His eyes narrowed. I think it's time Dr. Robert Harris learned the consequences of academic fraud. Elena studied him for a long moment. Mr. Reed, I didn't come here seeking vengeance. Not vengeance, Maxwell corrected. Justice, isn't that what you said you wanted? He straightened his already immaculate tie. Consider my resources at your disposal. Think about it overnight. We'll meet tomorrow to discuss details." As Maxwell turned to leave, Elena called after him. "Mr. Reed, the manuscript speaks of wisdom found in humility. Perhaps there's a lesson there for all of us." Maxwell paused at the door, regarding her with an unreadable expression. "Perhaps," he conceded, "though in my experience, humility rarely gets one's name on a building." With that, he departed, leaving Elena standing beneath the crystal chandeliers, her daughter's hand clasped firmly in hers. Dr. Montgomery approached them slowly. "Eleanor, what are you going to do?" Elena looked down at Lucia, then out at the glittering city beyond the windows. "I'm going to do what I've always done," she said quietly. "Protect my daughter, pursue the truth, and hope that wisdom eventually prevails over power." As the massive doors closed behind them, the manuscript lay open on its pedestal, its ancient wisdom finally revealed after centuries of silence. The following morning, Elena sat in a leather chair that probably cost more than her monthly rent, facing a wall of windows that framed Manhattan like a living painting. Maxwell Reed's corner office occupied the entire top floor of the Horizon Technologies headquarters in Midtown, offering panoramic views that reminded visitors of his status before he ever spoke a word. Lucia sat beside her mother, quietly drawing in a sketchbook provided by Maxwell's assistant. The child seemed unfazed by their surroundings, though Elena noticed her occasionally glancing at the scale model of Horizon's newest quantum computer displayed on a pedestal nearby. The door opened, and Maxwell entered with the brisk efficiency that had built his $47 billion fortune. Gone was the theatrical showman from the previous night, replaced by a businessman in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. 3 people followed him: his lawyer, his chief of staff, and a woman Elena didn't recognize. "Dr. Vega Rodriguez," Maxwell began without preamble, settling behind his desk. "I've spent the night verifying your background and considering our next steps. I assume you've had time to consider my proposal." Eleanor nodded. "I have, Mr. Reed, but before I respond, I need clarification on what exactly you're offering and what you expect in return." A hint of approval flickered across Maxwell's face. "Direct and practical. Good." He gestured to the unknown woman. "This is Amara Washington, head of our legal department. She's been researching your academic case all night." The lawyer stepped forward, opening a leather portfolio. "Dr. Vega Rodriguez, I've reviewed the available records from Stanford University regarding your dismissal. While the university followed proper procedures based on the evidence presented, there are significant questions about the evidence itself." "Meaning?" Elena asked. "The emails allegedly sent by you contained metadata inconsistencies that would have been flagged by a more thorough investigation. Additionally, several witness statements against you show remarkable similarities in phrasing, suggesting coordination." Amara closed her portfolio. "In my professional opinion, you were the victim of a sophisticated frame-up." Eleanor's hands tightened in her lap. After a decade of being disbelieved, hearing these words from a corporate lawyer was surreally validating. "Which brings us to my proposal," Maxwell continued. "I'm prepared to establish a new division within Horizon Technologies, the Institute for Cross-Cultural Understanding and Educational Access. You would serve as its executive director with complete academic autonomy, an initial budget of $50 million, and resources to clear your name and rebuild your career." Eleanor's eyes widened. $50 million? Maxwell waved dismissively. "A reasonable starting point. The Institute would focus on 3 primary objectives: preserving endangered languages and cultural knowledge, developing innovative educational programs for underserved communities, and researching ancient texts, like the manuscript your daughter translated." "And what do you get from this arrangement?" Elena asked carefully. "Several things," Maxwell replied with characteristic bluntness. "First, a legitimate claim to corporate social responsibility that goes beyond the usual PR exercises. Second, the distinction of housing groundbreaking research under the Horizon banner. Third, the satisfaction of exposing academic fraud and hypocrisy at the highest levels." He leaned forward, his blue eyes intense. "And fourth, though this may surprise you, a chance to correct a certain imbalance in my legacy." Elena studied him, trying to read beyond the practiced corporate persona. "The manuscript affected you." Something shifted in Maxwell's expression, a momentary crack in his armor. "Let's say I recognize the value of looking beyond conventional credentials to find exceptional talent. The room fell silent as Eleanor considered. Finally, she spoke. "I accept your offer, Mr. Reed, with 3 non-negotiable conditions." Maxwell raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "First, complete autonomy over the Institute's hiring practices and research directions. No corporate interference for publicity or profit motives." Maxwell nodded. "Reasonable, provided you deliver measurable results." "Second, a comprehensive overhaul of Horizon's internal labor practices, particularly for service and maintenance staff. Living wages, educational benefits, childcare assistance, and clear advancement pathways." This caused a visible reaction. Maxwell's chief of staff started to object, but Maxwell silenced him with a gesture. "That's considerably more expensive and disruptive than you might realize," he said carefully. "I've spent 10 years as one of those invisible workers, Mr. Reed. I know exactly what it costs, both financially and humanly." Elena's voice remained steady. "The manuscript speaks of seeing value in those overlooked by the powerful. Consider it a practical application of its wisdom." Maxwell studied her, a new calculation clearly running behind his eyes. "What's your third condition?" "My personal salary as director will be $1 annually. Every penny you would have paid me goes directly to fund educational scholarships for the children of service workers." The room fell silent. Maxwell's staff exchanged glances, clearly blindsided by these demands. "You're being offered a multi-million-dollar position," Maxwell said slowly, "and you want to work for free while directing funds to janitors' children?" "I'm being offered restoration and purpose," Elena corrected. "Those are worth more than any salary. And yes, I want to ensure that other parents working multiple jobs still see their children reach their potential." She glanced at Lucia, who continued drawing, apparently oblivious to the negotiation. "Every child deserves that chance." Maxwell leaned back in his chair, studying Elena with new interest. "You're either the worst negotiator I've ever encountered or—" He trailed off, reassessing. "No one walks away from that kind of money." "I'm not walking away from anything important," Elena replied simply. "My needs are modest. My daughter's education is now secured thanks to your prize money. What matters is creating lasting change." For nearly a minute, Maxwell said nothing, his fingers steepled beneath his chin as he considered. His staff remained frozen, waiting for his response. "Accepted," he finally said, surprising everyone in the room. "With one modification. Your salary will be competitive with other executive positions, but placed in a separate foundation that you control, dedicated to your educational initiatives. I won't have the executive director of a Horizon Institute living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Queens." Eleanor started to object, but Maxwell continued. "This isn't charity, Dr. Vega Rodriguez. It's practicality. Your credibility, and by extension the Institute's, requires certain appearances. The foundation gives you control while maintaining appropriate professional standards." After a moment's consideration, Eleanor nodded. "Very well, when do we begin?" "Immediately," Maxwell replied, already shifting to implementation mode. "Amara will handle your contract. My team will prepare a formal announcement for next week." He turned to his chief of staff. "Thomas, coordinate with HR on office space and initial staffing requirements." As his team sprang into action, Maxwell turned back to Elena. "There's one more matter we should discuss privately." He gestured toward a side door. "My conference room, if you don't mind. Your daughter can remain here with my assistant." Eleanor hesitated, glancing at Lucia. "I'll be fine, Mama," Lucia said without looking up from her drawing. "I'm almost finished with my quantum computer design." Maxwell blinked, looking at the child's drawing with sudden interest. "So you're what?" "I think your model has the qubits arranged inefficiently," Lucia explained, pointing to the display on the pedestal. "If you reposition them like this, you'd reduce decoherence by approximately 22%. Maxwell stared at the drawing, then at Lucia, then at Elena. "Your daughter understands quantum computing architecture," Elena sighed. "She reads a lot, all kinds of books." "Clearly," Maxwell murmured, examining the drawing more closely. "Thomas, have Dr. Chen from Quantum Division review this immediately." He handed the drawing to his astonished chief of staff before leading Elena to the conference room. Once the door closed behind them, Maxwell's demeanor changed subtly. The businessman receded, revealing something more complex and personal. "What I'm about to share isn't public knowledge," he began, moving to the window. 20 years ago, when I was building my first company, I encountered a situation not entirely unlike yours. Elena waited silently as he gathered his thoughts. I developed an algorithm that revolutionized predictive analytics. Before I could patent it, my business partner, also my mentor and friend, stole it, claimed it as his own, and pushed me out of the company. Maxwell's voice remained controlled, but Elena sensed old wounds beneath the surface. He had the connections, the credentials, the Ivy League network. I was a community college dropout with a gift for mathematics and no social capital. He turned to face her. I rebuilt from nothing, created Horizon, surpassed him and his company so thoroughly that history forgot his name. A cold satisfaction colored his words. Now I own the company he founded, and he works as a mid-level manager at a software firm in Omaha. Revenge, Elena said quietly. Justice, Maxwell corrected, echoing their conversation from the previous night. He faced consequences for his actions, as should your ex-husband. What are you proposing? Maxwell's smile was sharp. A symposium hosted by the new institute, focusing on academic integrity and cross-cultural philosophical transmission. We'll invite leading scholars in the field, including Dr. Robert Harris. Understanding dawned on Elena's face. A public confrontation. A reckoning, Maxwell clarified, with irrefutable evidence of his fraud presented before his peers, not by you, that could seem like a personal vendetta, but by independent researchers who've reviewed the case. Elena considered this carefully. It would destroy him professionally. As he destroyed you, Maxwell pointed out. The difference is that his destruction would be deserved. Elena walked to the window, looking out at the city below. For 10 years, she had fantasized about clearing her name, about Robert facing consequences for what he'd done. Now that the opportunity was within reach, she found herself hesitating. The manuscript teaches that true wisdom includes compassion, even toward those who have wronged us, she said softly. Maxwell made a dismissive gesture. Philosophical ideals are admirable, but practical justice requires consequences. Yes, Elena agreed, turning back to him, but those consequences should serve a greater purpose than mere retribution. She considered for a moment. I agree to the symposium, but with a different focus. Rather than simply exposing Robert, we'll use the event to establish new protocols for verifying academic integrity and protecting researchers from false accusations. You're suggesting systemic reform rather than personal vengeance, Maxwell observed. Exactly. Robert's fraud becomes a case study in a larger effort to improve academic accountability. Elena's expression hardened slightly. He'll still face consequences, but in service to preventing others from suffering as I did. Maxwell studied her with evident curiosity. You continue to surprise me, Dr. Vega Rodriguez. Most people in your position would want blood. Perhaps that's why I'm in this position, Elena replied, and perhaps that's why you're offering me this opportunity, despite your own history. Something unreadable flickered across Maxwell's face. Perhaps, he conceded. After a moment, he extended his hand. Very well, we have an agreement. As they shook hands, sealing their unlikely partnership, neither could have predicted how their lives, and the lives of countless others, were about to change. 3 months passed in a whirlwind of activity. The 47th floor of Horizon Tower, once home to the company's rarely used executive entertainment suite, had been transformed into the headquarters of the Institute for Cross-Cultural Understanding and Educational Access. Floor-to-ceiling windows still offered spectacular Manhattan views, but the space now hummed with purposeful energy instead of corporate excess. Elena stood in the main research area, surveying what they'd built in such a short time. Glass-walled offices housed specialists in ancient languages, educational technology, and cultural preservation. In the center, a collaborative workspace featured the manuscript that had changed everything, now properly preserved in a state-of-the-art display system that allowed for detailed study without risking the fragile pages. The Berkeley team confirmed our translation of the Aramaic section, announced Dr. Priya Sharma, a brilliant linguist who had been the first to join Elena's team. They're requesting permission to incorporate the findings into their digital ancient language database. Approved, Elena replied, with the usual conditions about proper attribution and open access. Priya nodded and departed, just as Amara Washington approached, tablet in hand. The board meeting starts in 20 minutes, Amara reminded her. Maxwell wants your quarterly report, particularly regarding the Service Worker Education Initiative. Eleanor nodded, gathering her materials. In just 12 weeks, they had established scholarship programs for employees' children, created a tuition assistance fund, and launched an innovative skills certification program that recognized practical knowledge often overlooked by traditional educational systems. The results were preliminary but promising. Also, Amara added more quietly, there's been significant pushback from the executive team about the new labor policies. Thomas Bradford is leading the resistance. Not surprising, Elena replied. Thomas, Maxwell's longtime chief of staff, had made no secret of his opposition to what he called her socialist overhaul of Horizon's employment practices. Any word from Maxwell? He's maintaining his support, at least publicly, but Bradford has significant influence with the board. Amara's expression was concerned. Be prepared for challenges today. Elena thanked her and headed toward the elevator, stopping briefly to check on Lucia, who was working with the educational technology team on a children's language learning program. At 8, her daughter had become something of a mascot for the institute, her natural linguistic abilities providing valuable insights into how children acquired language skills. Don't forget, we're meeting Dr. Montgomery for dinner, Eleanor reminded her. Lucia nodded without looking up from her tablet. I'm showing her my Sumerian flashcard system. Eleanor smiled and continued to the elevator. Claire Montgomery had become a valuable ally, providing academic credibility and connections during the Institute's formation. She had also become a friend, something Elena had few of after years of isolation. When Elena reached the boardroom, she immediately sensed the tension. 14 executives sat around a massive mahogany table, most wearing expressions ranging from skepticism to outright hostility. Only Maxwell at the head of the table appeared genuinely interested as Elena began her presentation. The quarterly numbers were impressive by any standard. 6 educational programs launched, 17 ancient texts in process of translation, partnerships with 4 universities established, and positive media coverage that had boosted Horizon's public image significantly. These initiatives have generated substantial goodwill, Elena concluded. Brand perception metrics show a 27% improvement in public trust, and we've seen an 18% increase in qualified job applications across all departments. At what cost? Thomas Bradford interrupted. Tall, with silver hair and the confidence of someone who'd held power for decades, he leaned forward aggressively. The new labor policies have increased operational expenses by nearly 12% company-wide, which has been offset by the 15% decrease in turnover, Elena countered smoothly. Reduced training costs and improved productivity have actually resulted in a net financial gain, as detailed on page 7. These numbers are manipulated, Bradford insisted, so you've creatively accounted for productivity improvements that can't be objectively measured. Maxwell raised a hand, silencing the brewing argument. Dr. Vega Rodriguez's methodology was reviewed by our financial team and found to be sound. His tone made it clear the matter was settled, though Bradford's expression remained mutinous. Let's move on to the symposium planning, Maxwell continued. It's scheduled for next month, correct? Eleanor nodded. Yes. We've confirmed participation from leading scholars in linguistics, philosophy, and ethics. The focus will be on academic integrity and cross-cultural philosophical transmission, with special attention to verification protocols and plagiarism prevention. She didn't need to mention that Robert Harris had accepted the invitation to deliver a keynote address. Everyone in the room knew about her history now. It had been carefully leaked to establish context for the Institute's founding, and most understood the symposium's deeper purpose. And the manuscript publication? Maxwell inquired. On schedule. The complete translation with scholarly commentary will be released at the symposium. We've also developed an interactive digital version that makes the text accessible to students and researchers worldwide. Bradford cleared his throat pointedly. While these academic pursuits are fascinating, I'm concerned about the practical business implications of Dr. Vega Rodriguez's influence on company policy. He turned to address the board directly. The maintenance staff restructuring has created an unsustainable precedent. Janitors are now receiving educational stipends and career development resources that exceed industry standards by over 300%. They're receiving fair compensation and opportunities, Elena corrected, which has resulted in higher quality work and unprecedented loyalty. They're janitors, Bradford said dismissively. Their job is to clean floors, not receive college counseling. A tense silence fell over the room. Even those who might have privately agreed with Bradford seemed uncomfortable with his bluntness. I was a janitor, Mr. Bradford, Elena said quietly. For 10 years I cleaned offices while holding a doctorate and speaking 7 languages. Many of your janitors have similar stories. Immigrants whose credentials aren't recognized, people who lost opportunities through no fault of their own, individuals supporting families while pursuing education. She gestured to the report in front of them. 15% of your maintenance staff hold advanced degrees from their countries of origin. 37% are pursuing higher education while working full-time. One of your night shift supervisors was a neurosurgeon in Syria. The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances as Elena continued. These aren't just heartwarming anecdotes. They represent untapped human capital that most corporations overlook. By recognizing and developing these individuals, Horizon gains loyalty, innovation, and perspectives that our competitors lack. Bradford scoffed. This isn't a charity or a social experiment. It's a technology company with responsibilities to its shareholders, which is precisely why these policies make sense, Maxwell interjected, surprising everyone. Our stock has risen 8% since the Institute's founding and the implementation of these labor reforms. Employee satisfaction is at an all-time high. Media coverage has been overwhelmingly positive. He fixed Bradford with a pointed stare. The business case is sound, Thomas. Your objection appears to be philosophical rather than practical. Bradford's face flushed. My objection is to fundamentally changing our business model based on the pet theories of... He caught himself, but not quickly enough. Of a former janitor, Elena finished for him. Or perhaps of a woman, a Latina. Please complete your thought. Before Bradford could respond, the boardroom door opened and an assistant entered, whispering urgently to Maxwell. His expression changed immediately. We need to pause this discussion, he announced, standing abruptly. Dr. Vega Rodriguez, would you join me, please? There's a situation that requires your attention. Elena followed him to his private office, where a news broadcast played on the wall-mounted screen. The headline made her blood run cold. Princeton professor denies plagiarism allegations, accuses Horizon Technologies of corporate smear campaign. Robert Harris's face filled the screen, handsome, distinguished, radiating academic authority. These allegations are not only false, but represent a disturbing example of corporate overreach into academic freedom, he was saying. Maxwell Reed is attempting to rewrite history to serve his company's public relations agenda. Elena sank into a chair, watching in disbelief as her ex-husband preemptively attacked the symposium's integrity and questioned her credentials. He portrayed himself as a victim of corporate power, defending academic independence against capitalist interference. He's trying to control the narrative, Maxwell observed grimly, casting himself as David against our Goliath. How did he know? Elena asked. The symposium program hasn't been published yet, and while he knows he's presenting, we haven't revealed the focus on verification protocols. We have a leak, Maxwell concluded. Someone provided him with internal documents. His expression darkened. Bradford. Elena processed this. He opposes the Institute's direction enough to sabotage it. Thomas has been with me for 15 years, Maxwell said. He believes he's protecting the company and me from what he sees as a dangerous distraction from our core business. He paused, watching Harris continue his preemptive defense. He underestimates both of us. What do we do now? Elena asked. Robert is framing this as a corporate vendetta before we've even presented our evidence. Maxwell studied the screen thoughtfully. We adapt. Your original approach was right, making this about systemic reform rather than personal vengeance. He turned to her. Do you have the evidence to definitively prove his fraud? Elena nodded. Yes, I've spent 10 years quietly gathering it. Emails, metadata analysis, witness statements from people who've since had changes of heart. Dr. Montgomery has been instrumental in validating the technical aspects. Then we proceed as planned, Maxwell decided, but we accelerate the timeline. Instead of waiting for the symposium, we release a comprehensive report next week, not as an attack on Harris specifically, but as a case study in academic verification protocols. He'll claim it's targeted harassment, Elena pointed out. Which is why you won't be the face of it, Maxwell replied. We'll have Dr. Montgomery and 3 other respected scholars present the findings as independent researchers. Your name won't appear until the evidence is irrefutable. Elena considered this approach. It could work, but she was interrupted by another assistant rushing in. "Sir, Dr. Vega Rodriguez's daughter is on the line. She says it's urgent." Elena took the call immediately, her heart racing. "Lucia, what's wrong?" Her daughter's voice was small but controlled. "Mama, there's a man here asking questions about you and the manuscript. He said he's a reporter, but Ms. Priya seems worried. She told me to call you right away." Elena's eyes met Maxwell's. "I'm coming right now, Mika. Stay with Dr. Sharma." She ended the call, already moving toward the door. "Someone's at the institute questioning my staff and approaching my daughter." Maxwell's response was immediate. "Security is on the way. I'm coming with you." As they rushed to the elevator, Maxwell's expression was grimmer than Elena had ever seen it. "This isn't just academic politics anymore," he said quietly. "Bradford may have started something he can't control." The elevator doors closed on his words, leaving the boardroom and its power struggles behind as they raced to protect what had suddenly become much more than a professional project for both of them. When Elena and Maxwell reached the institute's floor, they found security personnel already escorting a well-dressed man toward the elevator. Dr. Sharma stood protectively beside Lucia, her arm around the child's shoulders. "Walter Jenkins, New York Times," the man called out as he spotted them. "Dr. Vega Rodriguez, I'd like to get your response to Dr. Harris's allegations about your qualifications and the manuscript's authenticity." "No comment," Maxwell replied sharply, positioning himself between the reporter and Elena. "Any inquiries should go through Horizon's communications department." As security removed the persistent journalist, Elena hurried to her daughter. "Are you okay, Mija?" Lucia nodded, seemingly more curious than frightened. "He asked a lot of questions about how I learned the languages. He didn't believe me when I said you taught me." Dr. Sharma looked troubled. He was recording everything, trying to get Lucia to contradict herself. "I intervened as soon as I realized what was happening." "Thank you," Elena said fervently, then turned to Maxwell. "This is just the beginning, isn't it?" Maxwell's expression was grim. "Robert Harris is well connected in academic and media circles. He's launching a preemptive campaign to discredit you and the manuscript before we can present our evidence." "We need to accelerate our timeline," Elena agreed, "but we also need to protect Lucia. I won't have her turned into a media spectacle or subjected to hostile questioning." "I have a solution for that," Maxwell said. "My home in the Berkshires. It's private, secure, and has excellent internet connectivity. You and Lucia can work from there until the symposium, with a small team of your choosing." Elena hesitated. "Running away will look like an admission of guilt." "Not running, strategizing," Maxwell corrected. "You'll continue leading the institute remotely while we prepare our response. Meanwhile, I'll handle the board and the media here in New York." After a moment's consideration, Elena nodded. "All right, but I want Dr. Montgomery to join us. She's crucial to verifying the technical evidence." "Already arranged," Maxwell replied. "She'll meet you there tonight." Within hours, Elena and Lucia were in a helicopter heading north, watching Manhattan recede in the distance. Beside them, Dr. Sharma and 2 other key team members reviewed documents on their tablets, preparing for the intensive work ahead. "You trust him?" Dr. Sharma asked quietly, once they were airborne. Elena considered the question carefully. 3 months ago, she'd seen Maxwell Reed as the embodiment of privileged arrogance. Now she was flying to his private estate, relying on his protection and resources. "I trust his interest in the truth," she finally replied, "and in proving Robert Harris wrong." Dr. Sharma nodded, seemingly satisfied with this pragmatic assessment. Maxwell's home turned out to be a modern architectural marvel, nestled among ancient trees on a private mountain. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed spectacular views of forested hills and a pristine lake, while the interior featured an elegant minimalism that somehow managed to feel both luxurious and welcoming. "This is where Mr. Reed lives?" Lucia asked, wide-eyed as she explored the soaring main room. "One of several homes," explained the property manager, a dignified woman named Mrs. Calloway, "though he rarely has time to visit anymore." Elena wondered at the loneliness that seemed to echo through the beautiful, empty spaces. For all his wealth and power, Maxwell Reed appeared to have few personal connections. No family photos adorned the walls, no mementos suggested cherished memories. By evening, they had transformed the home's east wing into a command center. Secure servers were established, communication protocols implemented, and workstations arranged for each team member. Dr. Montgomery arrived as darkness fell, bringing additional evidence and a determined energy that immediately lifted everyone's spirits. "Harris is making a critical mistake," she declared, unpacking her equipment. "By going public with accusations before the symposium, he's opened himself to counter-evidence that might otherwise have been handled more discreetly. He's always been overconfident," Elena observed. "It's why he believed he could steal my research and never face consequences." For the next 3 days, they worked almost continuously, assembling a comprehensive report that methodically dismantled Robert's claims. The document wasn't framed as a personal vendetta, but as a case study in academic verification, exactly as Elena had originally envisioned for the symposium. On the afternoon of the 4th day, as they were finalizing the report, Mrs. Calloway announced a visitor. "Mr. Reed has arrived," she informed them, a note of surprise in her voice suggesting this was an unusual occurrence. Maxwell strode in moments later, looking slightly less polished than his normal Manhattan appearance. His suit was still impeccable, but there was a weariness around his eyes that spoke of difficult days. "The situation has escalated," he announced without preamble. "Harris has convinced Princeton to issue a statement supporting his academic integrity and questioning our motives. Several media outlets are portraying this as a corporate attack on academic freedom." "What about the board?" Elena asked. "Divided," Maxwell replied grimly. "Bradford has been rallying support against what he calls our distraction from core business priorities." His expression hardened. "He's also been feeding information to Harris through intermediaries." "You can prove that?" Dr. Montgomery asked sharply. "Yes, our cybersecurity team intercepted communications." Maxwell accepted a cup of coffee from Mrs. Calloway with a distracted nod of thanks. "Bradford's being dealt with." Something in his tone made Elena study him more carefully. "What exactly does being dealt with mean?" "He's been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into corporate espionage," Maxwell replied. "His access to Horizon systems has been revoked, and his communications are being reviewed." "And the symposium?" Dr. Sharma asked. "Still proceeding, but with heightened security and media interest." Maxwell set down his cup and moved to the windows, gazing out at the darkening forest. "Harris has confirmed he'll attend, apparently confident in his ability to control the narrative." "He doesn't know what evidence we have," Elena noted. "No, but he knows we have something. He's preparing counter-arguments for everything he thinks we might present." Maxwell turned back to face them. "Which is why we need to release the preliminary report tomorrow, not next week." Eleanor exchanged glances with her team. "We're close, but not finished. There are still verification steps. We don't have the luxury of perfection," Maxwell interrupted. "Harris is gaining ground with his preemptive narrative. We need to shift the momentum." Dr. Montgomery straightened. "He's right, Eleanor. The report is substantively complete. We can release it as preliminary findings with the final version to follow at the symposium." After brief discussion, they agreed. The preliminary report would be released the following morning with Dr. Montgomery as lead author and Elena's name deliberately absent. The strategy was clear. Establish the evidence first, separate from Elena's personal story. As the team returned to their final preparations, Maxwell gestured Elena toward the terrace. They stepped outside into the cool evening air, the scent of pine and approaching rain surrounding them. "There's something else you should know," Maxwell said quietly. "Harris has been investigating you personally beyond the academic issues." Elena tensed. "What do you mean?" "He's hired private investigators to track your movements over the past decade. They've been questioning your former neighbors, co-workers, even Lucia's previous teachers." "Looking for what?" "Anything to discredit you," Maxwell replied, "particularly regarding Lucia's education and linguistic abilities. He's floating theories that you've fabricated her skills or subjected her to some form of exploitation." Elena's face paled. "That's absurd. I've devoted my life to protecting and nurturing her." "I know that," Maxwell assured her. "But Harris is desperate. He's built his entire career on stolen research. If that's exposed, he loses everything." Eleanor paced the terrace, anger and fear battling within her. "He's trying to position himself as the victim while simultaneously attacking my parenting. After what he did to me, to us, It's a predictable strategy, Maxwell observed. Attacking your credibility as both a scholar and a mother undermines your most powerful positions. And puts Lucia in the crosshairs, Elena added, her voice tight with controlled fury. Which is exactly why I kept her away from academia all these years. She stopped pacing, facing Maxwell directly. I won't allow her to become collateral damage in this fight. Neither will I, Maxwell replied with unexpected intensity. Which is why I've implemented additional security measures and legal protections. Any media outlet that publishes unfounded allegations about Lucia will face immediate and severe litigation. Elena studied him, struck by his vehemence. This has become personal for you, hasn't it? Maxwell seemed startled by the observation. He turned away, looking out over the darkened landscape. I admire your work, and I believe in the Institute's mission, he said carefully. That's not what I asked. For a long moment, Maxwell was silent. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its usual authority, revealing something more complex beneath. When I was 12, my mother was accused of academic fraud at the community college, where she taught mathematics. The accusation was false, engineered by a colleague who resented her talent despite her lack of credentials. He paused, and Elena sensed he was sharing something rarely spoken aloud. She was publicly humiliated, lost her position, and never taught again. She died believing her work had no value. His hands tightened on the terrace railing. I built Horizon partly to prove that credentials matter less than genuine brilliance. I didn't know, Elena said softly. Few do. Maxwell straightened, his moment of vulnerability clearly over. The point is that I understand what's at stake beyond the professional considerations. Harris isn't just threatening your career, he's attacking your identity and your relationship with your daughter. So what do we do? Elena asked. We release the report tomorrow as planned, but we also prepare for Harris to escalate. Maxwell's expression was resolute. He'll likely make a dramatic public statement once our evidence emerges. And when he does, we'll be ready. Maxwell checked his watch. I need to return to New York tonight. The board requires management. His smile was brief but genuine. Continue your work here. I'll handle things on my end. As he turned to leave, Elena called after him. Maxwell. He paused, looking back. Thank you, not just for the resources, but for understanding what this really means. Something shifted in his expression, a brief softening that few ever witnessed. 10 years ago, no one stood with my mother against those who destroyed her. Some injustices should not go unchallenged. With those words he departed, leaving Elena on the terrace with the weight of their shared understanding. The battle ahead wasn't just about academic vindication or corporate reputation. It was about recognizing worth in those society had deemed invisible, about challenging power that presumed itself beyond accountability. As Elena rejoined her team, she found Lucia working alongside Dr. Montgomery, her small hands moving confidently across a tablet as she helped organize translation examples for the report. Ready for tomorrow, Mama? Lucia asked, looking up with complete trust. Elena stroked her daughter's hair, resolve hardening within her. Yes, Mija, more than ready. What she didn't say, what she didn't need to say to those who knew her, was that she had been preparing for this moment for 10 years. Robert Harris had destroyed her past, but he would not determine her future or her daughter's. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel glittered with chandeliers and anticipation. 300 of the world's leading linguists, philosophers and educators had gathered for the symposium's closing session, the event that would culminate 3 days of presentations and discussions on academic integrity and cross-cultural philosophical transmission. Elena stood backstage, watching the audience settle into their seats. The preliminary report released 2 weeks earlier had detonated like a controlled explosion in academic circles. Its meticulous documentation of Robert Harris's fraud had been impossible to dismiss, particularly with 4 respected scholars as its authors and no mention of Elena herself. Harris had responded predictably, first with indignation, then with counter-accusations, and finally with a carefully worded statement suggesting misunderstandings and contextual factors that would become clear at the upcoming symposium. His supporters had gradually fallen silent as the evidence mounted. Now the moment of reckoning had arrived. In 15 minutes, Elena would take the stage to present the complete translation of the manuscript and officially reclaim her place in the academic world. But first, Maxwell Reed would introduce her. "Nervous?" Maxwell asked, approaching in a tailored charcoal suit that somehow managed to appear both authoritative and understated. "Not about the presentation," Elena replied honestly, "but about seeing Robert face to face after all these years." "Yes." Maxwell nodded toward the front row where Robert Harris sat rigidly beside Princeton's chancellor. At 55, Robert remained handsome in a distinguished way, though stress had etched new lines around his mouth and eyes. He projected confident composure, but Elena, who had once known him intimately, recognized the tension in his shoulders, the slight tremor in his hands as he reviewed his notes. "He still intends to speak?" she asked. "Yes. He's requested a brief response period after your presentation." Maxwell's expression was neutral, but his eyes were sharp. "Our sources indicate he's planning some form of partial confession framed as a misunderstanding, followed by an appeal to move forward collaboratively." Elena wasn't surprised. Robert had always been skilled at navigating out of difficult situations, recasting himself as reasonable and conciliatory when cornered. "Are you ready?" Maxwell asked. Elena straightened her shoulders, smoothing the jacket of her elegant navy suit, a far cry from the maintenance uniform she'd worn for a decade. "More than ready." The lights dimmed, signaling the session's beginning. Maxwell squeezed her arm briefly before walking onto the stage to enthusiastic applause. His 3-month transformation from corporate villain to champion of academic integrity and educational access had been remarkable, a public rehabilitation that paralleled Elena's own. "Distinguished colleagues," Maxwell began, his voice carrying effortlessly through the ballroom. "Over the past 3 days, we've examined the critical intersection of academic integrity, technological verification, and cross-cultural understanding. Today, we conclude with what I believe will be recognized as a landmark contribution to multiple fields." He paused, surveying the audience. "But before I introduce our final speaker, I want to acknowledge the extraordinary journey that brought us here. 3 months ago, I hosted an event designed to humiliate academic experts who failed to translate an ancient manuscript. I intended it as entertainment, a spectacle of intellectual comeuppance." Murmurs rippled through the audience at this unexpected confession. "That night I discovered something unexpected. Wisdom can appear in places the powerful often overlook, and true knowledge transcends credentials and status." Maxwell's gaze swept the room. The manuscript itself taught this lesson, as you'll soon hear. But more importantly, the people connected to it demonstrated this truth through their actions. He gestured toward the wings. "It is my profound honor to introduce Dr. Elena Vega Rodriguez, Executive Director of the Institute for Cross-Cultural Understanding and Educational Access, who will present the complete translation and analysis of the manuscript that has challenged scholars for centuries." The applause was thunderous as Elena walked onto the stage. She felt Robert's eyes tracking her movement, sensed his calculation and growing unease as she took her place at the podium. "Thank you, Mr. Reed," she began, her voice steady, "and thank you all for your engagement throughout this symposium." For the next 40 minutes, Elena presented the manuscript's complete translation, a philosophical text that wove together Eastern and Western wisdom traditions with remarkable sophistication. She explained how its unique structure, shifting between languages to capture nuanced concepts unavailable in any single tradition, represented an unprecedented approach to cross-cultural philosophical synthesis. The scholarly audience listened in rapt attention as she connected the manuscript's teachings about wisdom, humility, and human value to contemporary questions of knowledge, power, and recognition. She presented evidence of its authenticity, its historical context, and its significance for multiple fields of study. Not once did she mention Robert Harris or her personal history. The work spoke for itself, and her mastery of the material was undeniable. As she concluded, the ballroom erupted in a standing ovation. Even those who had been skeptical of the manuscript's importance or authenticity were visibly moved by the presentation. Only Robert remained seated, his expression unreadable. "Thank you," Eleanor said as the applause finally subsided. "Before we open for questions, Dr. Robert Harris has requested an opportunity to respond. Dr. Harris, the floor is yours." A tense silence fell as Robert made his way to the podium. Up close, Eleanor could see the strain beneath his polished exterior, the slight sheen of perspiration on his forehead, the tightness around his mouth. Thank you, Dr. Vega Rodriguez, he began, his voice betraying only the slightest tremor. Your presentation was illuminating. He turned to face the audience. I'd like to address what many of you are wondering about, the relationship between Dr. Vega Rodriguez's work and my own publications on cross-cultural philosophical transmission. He paused, visibly gathering himself. 10 years ago, Dr. Vega Rodriguez and I were both young scholars exploring similar territory. We were also briefly married. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Our professional and personal lives became complicated. In the confusion of our deteriorating relationship, there were misunderstandings about the origin of certain ideas. Elena maintained a neutral expression, though inwardly she marveled at his audacity. He was attempting to reframe deliberate academic theft as a marital misunderstanding. I now recognize that some concepts I believed were collaborative were, in fact, primarily Dr. Vega Rodriguez's work. Robert's voice took on a practiced tone of regretful reflection. Academia can be competitive, and in my eagerness to establish my own reputation, I may have failed to properly attribute contributions. The audience shifted uncomfortably. His partial admission was clearly designed to minimize damage while positioning himself as reasonable and contrite. In the spirit of reconciliation and academic integrity, I propose we move forward collaboratively, he continued, perhaps co-authoring a paper that clarifies our respective contributions and explores the manuscript's significance together. It was a masterful performance, acknowledging just enough wrongdoing to appear honest while attempting to salvage his reputation and insinuate himself into the manuscript's continuing research. Elena stepped forward. Thank you, Dr. Harris, for acknowledging that the ideas in your landmark paper originated with my research. Her voice was calm but carried throughout the silent ballroom. However, I must correct several mischaracterizations in your statement. She turned to address the audience directly. What Dr. Harris terms misunderstandings were in fact deliberate actions. He systematically stole my research notes, altered digital evidence, and coordinated false testimony from colleagues to destroy my academic credibility. Robert's face tightened. Elena, this is hardly the venue for personal. This is precisely the venue for truth, Robert, she interrupted. You've had 10 years to speak the truth and chose not to. Now the evidence has done it for you. She gestured toward the screens where a timeline appeared, documenting the systematic fraud with irrefutable evidence, metadata from falsified emails, testimony from former colleagues who had recanted their statements, and forensic analysis of digital tampering. As for your proposal of collaboration, Elena continued, I must decline. The Institute will continue its work on the manuscript with our existing team of scholars, all of whom have demonstrated both intellectual rigor and ethical integrity. Robert's face flushed with anger. You've orchestrated this entire symposium as an elaborate revenge plot, he accused, using corporate money to rewrite academic history. The audience tensed at the escalating confrontation. Maxwell moved slightly forward, but Elena raised a hand, stopping him. This isn't about revenge, Robert, she said quietly. It's about restoration, not just of my reputation, but of academic principles themselves. She turned to address the room. The manuscript we've been studying teaches that true wisdom includes recognizing worth in those society overlooks. For 10 years, I cleaned offices at night while raising my daughter and preserving my knowledge. I was invisible to the powerful, including many in this room. Her gaze swept the audience. How many brilliant minds are we ignoring because they lack the right credentials, connections, or backgrounds? How many immigrants with advanced degrees are driving taxis or cleaning hotels? How many insights are we missing because we confuse status with knowledge? Robert attempted to interject, but Elena continued. The Institute's mission extends beyond this manuscript. We're establishing programs to recognize and develop overlooked talent, to create verification systems that protect innovative research, and to build educational pathways for those traditionally excluded from academic opportunities. She paused, then added, including a special program for scholars whose careers have been damaged by fraud or misconduct. Looking directly at Robert, she said, You're welcome to apply, Dr. Harris. We believe in second chances based on genuine accountability. The audience erupted in spontaneous applause. Robert stood frozen, his carefully constructed narrative collapsing around him. After a moment of visible struggle, he walked stiffly back to his seat. As the session transitioned to questions, Maxwell leaned close to Eleanor. "That was unexpected," he murmured, offering him a path to redemption rather than destruction. "The manuscript teaches compassion alongside justice," Elena replied softly. "Besides, destroying him would be easy. Challenging him to rebuild with integrity is much harder." Maxwell studied her with evident admiration. "You continue to surprise me, Dr. Vega Rodriguez." The symposium concluded with tremendous energy and enthusiasm for the Institute's future work. As attendees mingled during the closing reception, Elena found herself surrounded by colleagues offering congratulations and collaboration opportunities. The academic world that had rejected her was now eager to embrace her return. She was discussing a potential partnership with Oxford University when she noticed Robert standing alone near the exit, watching her. After excusing herself, Elena approached him. "Your victory is complete," he said bitterly as she reached him. "Congratulations." "This isn't about winning, Robert," she replied. "It's about truth, something the manuscript has much to say about." His laugh was hollow. "Always the idealist. Meanwhile, Princeton is reviewing my status, and my publisher has suspended my contract." "Actions have consequences," Elena said simply, "as I've learned all too well." Robert studied her, his anger giving way to something more complex. "How did you do it? Survive all those years, I mean. When everything happened, I genuinely believed you'd fade into obscurity." "I nearly did," Elena admitted, "but I had Lucia to think about, and I had knowledge that couldn't be taken from me, even when everything else was." Something flickered in Robert's eyes, perhaps the first genuine regret she'd seen from him. "The little girl who can read ancient languages, she's remarkable." "Yes, she is." An uncomfortable silence stretched between them. "I meant what I said about the program," Elena finally said. "If you're genuinely interested in rebuilding with integrity, the opportunity exists." Robert's pride visibly battled with his pragmatism. "I'll consider it," he managed before turning away. As he disappeared through the exit, Eleanor felt a decade of tension begin to dissolve. She had faced her past and reclaimed her future, not through vengeance, but through the same wisdom the manuscript had preserved for centuries. Across the room, she spotted Lucia chatting animatedly with a group of linguists, the child's natural enthusiasm for languages drawing them into her orbit despite the age difference. Nearby, Maxwell engaged with university presidents and foundation directors, expanding the Institute's network of partners. "Quite a transformation," observed Dr. Montgomery, appearing at Elena's side. "Both yours and his." She nodded toward Maxwell. "We've all changed," Elena acknowledged, "though I think Lucia may have catalyzed most of it." Dr. Montgomery smiled. "Children often see what adults overlook. Speaking of which, she's apparently explaining her theory of linguistic pattern recognition to the head of MIT's cognitive science department." They shared a laugh as they watched Lucia gesturing enthusiastically to the bemused professor. "What happens now?" Dr. Montgomery asked. Elena considered the question. "The Institute continues its work. We have educational programs to expand, ancient texts to preserve, and overlooked scholars to support." She paused. "And I have a daughter to raise who will likely be applying to college by age 12. And Reed, he seems quite invested in the Institute's success." Eleanor caught the subtle correction and the question behind it. "Maxwell has his own reasons for supporting our work. Some professional, some personal, and some perhaps more personal than others," Dr. Montgomery suggested gently. Before Eleanor could respond, Maxwell approached, accompanied by a distinguished woman Eleanor recognized as the president of the MacArthur Foundation. "Dr. Vega Rodriguez," Maxwell said formally, though his eyes conveyed something warmer. "Doctor, Abernathy is interested in discussing a potential partnership to expand the educational access programs nationally." The conversation that followed was exactly the kind Elena had once thought forever beyond her reach. Substantive, respectful, filled with possibilities for meaningful change. As they discussed implementation strategies and impact metrics, she felt the final pieces of her professional identity clicking back into place, not as a restoration of what was lost, but as something new and stronger. Later that evening, as the event wound down, Elena found herself alone with Maxwell on the hotel's rooftop terrace. The New York skyline glittered around them, a constellation of human ambition and achievement. The board has unanimously approved permanent funding for the institute, Maxwell informed her. Even Bradford's allies were impressed by the symposium's success and the positive media coverage, and Bradford himself resigned this morning. He's accepted a position with a competitor who shares his more traditional views on corporate responsibility. Maxwell's smile was ironic. It seems we've both lost long-time adversaries today. Not lost, Elena corrected, simply redirected toward better paths, hopefully. Maxwell studied her in the soft evening light. You genuinely want Harris to redeem himself, don't you, despite everything he did? I want him to choose redemption, Elena clarified. Whether he will is his decision, but offering the possibility seems right, given everything the manuscript teaches about wisdom and compassion. The manuscript that brought us together, Maxwell observed, rather accidentally. Nothing in that manuscript happened by accident, Elena replied with a smile. Its whole message is about recognizing value in unexpected places. Maxwell nodded slowly, like finding a brilliant linguist mopping floors, or discovering that a ruthless CEO might have principles after all. Exactly. Their eyes met in a moment of shared understanding that transcended their professional relationship. The rooftop door opened, and Lucia bounded out, followed by Dr. Montgomery. Mama, Dr. Claire says I can visit her lab at Columbia next week to test my language learning program. Elena smiled at her daughter's enthusiasm. That sounds wonderful, Miha. Maxwell checked his watch. It's getting late. My driver can take you both home. Actually, Elena said, I promised Lucia we'd celebrate tonight. We're staying here at the hotel. Room service and movies, a proper vacation. Ice cream sundaes, Lucia added excitedly. Maxwell hesitated, then said, Perhaps, if you don't mind company, my chef at the penthouse makes exceptional ice cream, and the view is better than any hotel room. The invitation hung in the air, casual yet significant, extending beyond professional courtesy into something more personal. Elena glanced at her daughter, who was practically bouncing with anticipation, then back at Maxwell. We'd like that, she said simply. As they left the terrace together, the billionaire, the scholar, and the extraordinary child, Dr. Montgomery watched with a knowing smile. The manuscript had been right all along. Wisdom appeared in unexpected places, true wealth transcended material possession, and sometimes those overlooked by the powerful carried the brightest light of all. 6 months later, Horizon Technologies hosted a company-wide celebration marking the Institute's first year. Employees from every level gathered in the atrium, executives in bespoke suits mingling with maintenance staff who now participated in education programs and career development initiatives. On a small stage, Elena stood beside Maxwell, watching Lucia present the first graduates of the Service Worker Education Program with their certificates. At 8 years old, the child spoke with natural confidence, switching effortlessly between English and Spanish to ensure every family member understood the significance of the achievement. The true measure of any institution, Lucia was saying, reciting words from the manuscript that had changed their lives, is not in the heights of its towers, but in how it lifts those who begin at the bottom. Eleanor felt Maxwell's hand brush against hers, a subtle gesture intimate yet professional in the public setting. Their relationship had evolved gradually, built on mutual respect and shared purpose, neither rushing to define what was still developing between them. As applause erupted for the graduates, Eleanor surveyed the gathered employees, the visible and the formerly invisible, now recognized equally for their contributions and potential. The maintenance supervisor who was completing his engineering degree, the cafeteria worker pursuing certification in nutritional science, the security guard studying international relations. The transformation wasn't just in programs or policies, but in the culture itself, in how people saw each other and themselves. Maxwell had changed too, his ruthless efficiency now tempered with consideration, his definition of success expanded beyond profit margins and market share. When the ceremony concluded, he stepped forward to make an announcement. Today, Horizon Technologies is launching the Invisible Light Foundation with an initial endowment of $1 billion. The room fell silent in shock. This independent foundation will expand the Institute's educational access programs nationally, supporting overlooked talent wherever it exists. He gestured toward Eleanor and Lucia. We've learned that brilliance doesn't always come with credentials, that wisdom often speaks through unexpected voices. and that seeing value in those society overlooks benefits everyone. His gaze swept the room. This initiative isn't charity. It's investment in human potential that traditional systems fail to recognize. As the crowd erupted in applause, Eleanor felt a profound sense of completion. The manuscript's journey had come full circle, from an instrument of humiliation to a catalyst for transformation, its ancient wisdom finding new expression in the modern world. Later, as they watched the sunset from Maxwell's office, Lucia curled up with a book on a nearby couch. Eleanor reflected on the unlikely path that had brought them here. 10 years cleaning floors, she mused. And now this. Maxwell considered her words. The manuscript says the true wise ones are those who can find value in what others dismiss. He glanced at Lucia, then back to Elena. I think I'm finally beginning to understand what that means. Elena smiled, recognizing how far they had all traveled from that first night of planned humiliation and unexpected revelation. It means we're all still learning, she said simply, in many different languages.